today's topic, we have two very special panelists. Brent G. Filbert is the Pentagon retired 30 years U.S. Navy veteran, professor, and clinical director of Mizzou Veteran Clinic of the University of Missouri School of Law. We also have Coco Culhane. She is the founder and executive director of the Veteran Advocacy Project. Coco is an adjunct professor of clinical law at Brooklyn Law School, where she teaches the Veterans Right Clinic. And I love that part of Brooklyn. That's where I grew up as a child and I left there for college. But Brooklyn is dear to my heart. Discussion today is Veterans Discharge Upgrades. Okay, Brent, why don't you take it off and lead us into your guest?
Arnold, thanks for having us on again. I really appreciate it. And we really do have a heavy hitter in the world of veterans advocacy and having Coco Culhane on to talk about discharge upgrades. Dr. Arnold, you went through some of her accomplishments, but really, if you were going to sum up, I think, what she's about, it is about a long-term commitment to helping veterans who've been discharged with less than honorable discharges and typically have some kind of mental health or traumatic brain injury or some other thing that's going on in many of the cases that she handles. So welcome, Coco, to the show.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
So I think a great thing to start out with is whenever we have a guest on the show is really to talk about you're the founder and executive director of the Veteran Advocacy Project. Just talk about the creation of that organization and what you do and what the focus is for the Veteran Advocacy Project.
Sure, thank you. So the creation would be back when I was in law school and was doing some research and came across a case called Veterans for Common Sense versus Peak at the time. And basically, I found out at that time that the suicide rate was 18 veterans per day and almost fell off my chair and just thought, suddenly realized how disconnected I was. So I looked for a place to volunteer in New York City, and there were no veterans legal services at the time. So really got it stuck in my head that there should be. And, so a long story short, we launched as a part of a larger nonprofit. We were part of their mental health project and then spun off as the needs were growing, and didn't really tackle discharges until I think about 2012 is when we started on that. And it soon became, we realized the need was just so immense. So it's really become the heart of the organization.
So, Dr. Arnold and I are both veterans, and so we understand, based on our experiences, what happens when a service member is discharged prematurely from their service particularly with some kind of administrative separation or some kind of minor misconduct. But I wondered if you could talk about, in the cases that you handle, what's sort of the typical pattern in terms of the discharge of the veteran, and then what it means to have a less than honorable discharge for a veteran. We're talking about combat veterans, people who've served in Iraq and Afghanistan. Dr. Arnold served in Iraq. Really, how that works and what it means to a veteran who ends up in that situation.
Well, I think a perfect example is actually the first case that we had. It was a Marine who had served in Iraq, and he had been home 4 or 5 years when he came into our office, and he came in with a child support issue, and he was suicidal, had various addiction issues, and had a bad conduct discharge. Basically, he had been in Iraq and had a pretty rough tour, came home, started drinking a lot, and eventually, it escalated to different narcotics, just trying to numb himself, really. And so he faced special court-martial and wound up with a bad conduct discharge. And here was someone, he couldn't remember his own middle name from his traumatic brain injury. I think he had been through 3 different roadside bombs. And he was just filled with shame. It was like his service, suddenly they told him it wasn't good enough or it didn't mean something. And he was really, really struggling. And that's when I realized, like, we've got to help this person. This is, outrageous that someone has, post-traumatic stress, traumatic brain injury, shrapnel throughout his 2 legs, and we're telling him we're not going to even give him health care. I mean, it enraged me.
Yes.
And then we've also had, we had another client who has never told his family over the last 50 years. And when we actually worked on his case with him, he had to, confront that. And it was, I think, one of the most difficult things he's had to do in his life. So it's a powerful wound for some veterans.
Sure. Yeah. So what happens when a veteran has let's say, an other than honorable discharge? Do they get VA benefits?
So it's this really tricky gray area where, they have the VA, there are statutory bars and then the regulatory bars, and the VA, my experience is they tend to just say no to an OTH, and you really usually have to fight. You have to fight back to prove, that you don't meet these. And the problem is the bars are very vague. There are things, the one that I think is really the catch-all is willful and persistent misconduct, which is pretty, you can define, and a lot of stuff falls into that bucket. And then there's also just not enough information out there about how veterans have a right to a hearing and everything, and that an OTH really isn't a no at the VA. So,
right.
I think.
Yeah, sure. So let's say a veteran's listening to this show, right, and they're wondering, and they have let's say they have an other than honorable discharge. Do they have a chance to get their discharge upgraded? I mean, is that something that they could actually accomplish? And to accomplish that, do they need help to do that, in your opinion?
100%. I mean, I think it's tough because some people, there's always like someone who has a buddy who got it done in a month, right? And then there's always someone who has been told it's too hard, don't even bother. And I think, the truth is in the middle. And if you can get a lawyer who has experience in this, that's really your best shot. Because you're going in, sort of with someone fighting for you. If you can find, and it doesn't necessarily have to be a lawyer, right? I think there are a lot of VSOs that have been doing this for decades around the country. So, but I think having an advocate, it really, really helps to navigate what can be a very confusing process.
Right. Yeah. So I do discharge upgrade work at the University of Missouri Veterans Clinic, and I guess at full disclosure, I'm going to be joining the Veteran Advocacy Project with Coco in a couple of months, being the director of military law.
Oh,
yeah,
excellent.
so it's going to be great. Yeah, no, it's going to be terrific. So, Dr. Allen, the reason that Coco and I are really teaming up is because of this overwhelming need to help veterans with these negative discharges.
Yes.
So just a factoid, and then I'll turn it over to you, Dr. Allen, for whatever you want to talk with Coco about. But since 9/11 occurred, there's been 600,000 veterans have been discharged with less than an honorable discharge. So, and many of those veterans are combat veterans in Afghanistan and Iraq.
Repeat that number.
And
that is
600,000.
I was the 1,000 part. I said I can't believe it. It's almost a
Isn't that stunning? Yeah. And it's the situation often where they will get discharged because of and the command has certain responsibilities they're trying to carry out, but the idea is to get them discharged quickly without much thought about the ramifications for the veteran, him or herself. So that's the situation, and that's why, at least from my perspective, joining forces with Coco to really just focus on discharge upgrades is really an exciting and necessary venture that I can't tell you how excited I'm going to be to really get in there and do that just exclusively on behalf of veterans.
We're so excited. If I can throw out one more factoid, there was a study done looking at veterans who were discharged for misconduct between, I think it was 2011 and 2015, and 62% of them had already been diagnosed with post-traumatic stress disorder. So to me, that's one of the most outrageous facts, that proves we're really punishing people who have sacrificed.
Yeah, that was my question, because this really dovetails into disability status, right? So if someone comes back and they are, less than honorably, discharged, then they then face the battle with VA benefits, right? And being seen correctly. So you can't even diagnose those things that someone may be suffering from, which may have led to the reason why you think they should be dishonorably discharged. It seems like this seems like an outrageous approach, as you were mentioning, Coco, to our veterans.
Yeah, and it feels to me like we are not upholding our end of the deal. People are being injured, and we as a country, our government, promised to take care of them, and to cut off that health care for the very reason they need it is just such an injustice. Yeah.
So tell us about some of the the more difficult cases you had, and then some of the success stories. How do you feel? Because something must be motivating you to participate in this. I know Brent is really incredible, with his relentless pursuit of making sure justice is done. But for yourself personally, why is it so important? By the way, my brother-in-law, full disclosure, went to Brooklyn Law School as well as you did. He's down in Missouri as well.
Oh wow, we'll have to chat, compare your notes. I'm a Brooklyn-born, lifelong Brooklynite.
Same here.
So, let's see. Actually, one of the biggest successes we ever had is actually that Marine I was talking about, who was the first upgrade client. His upgrade is still pending, because there's such a backlog at these boards. It's at least a couple of years wait once you finally do submit your application. But we were able to work on the VA piece at the same time, sort of the parallel track. And we were able to win the argument that essentially he shouldn't be held accountable. The VA has this very strange definition of insanity. So if it was this visual, I would put air quotes around it. But so he was found insane for VA purposes, and we got his family over $500,000
wow.
in back benefits, which is a rare and just fantastic
yes.
win.
Yes.
But I would say one of the most compelling cases, we had a Vietnam veteran who was an only child, had an extremely low IQ, and we are almost certain he was a part of Project 100,000, which was, Robert McNamara's sort of social experiment of recruiting people who did not meet eligibility standards and seeing how they would fare. I'm not an expert on this, so I'll leave it at that.
Okay. Okay.
But so he definitely, should not have been drafted and sent to Vietnam. And he saw just unimaginable things and had a very difficult combat tour. And then when he got back, he'd heard that his mother was sick and he was denied leave. And so he, decided he had to go. And so he was AWOL, and he was given an other than honorable discharge. And his trauma was so bad that he would have flashbacks every time it rained. And he was trying to get services here in New York City where we're so lucky. There's so many resources. And he was actually asked to stop sharing in a trauma therapy group because his experiences were just too upsetting. Too graphic. So for him, getting into the VA was really about being able to talk to other Vietnam vets. And he was also living on about $800 a month in supplemental security income, Social Security. Yeah. And so we were able to increase that to over $3,000 a month from the VA. So
huge.
Yeah.
Huge difference.
That one, I think, really meant a lot because it was transformative for him, for his life, and long overdue.
Yeah, that's phenomenal. You just reminded me of talking about flashbacks. I remember when I came back from my first tour in Iraq, and I was with the mechanized infantry unit at that point, and we came back and we were sitting in this room, shoulder to shoulder, about 300 people in the room, and there's a sergeant who walked in, and this was just bringing us back into the country, and he walked around and he said, "Okay, is anyone in here crazy? You have any mental health issues? Raise your hand." And everyone is sitting there with their chain of command. That was our mental health screening coming back into the country.
Wow.
And I said, "You've got to be kidding me."
And what year was that?
And that was back in 2000. And that was my first tour. That was 2000 and 2004, 5. I was in my first combat tour. Yeah.
Wow, that's amazing.
Yeah,
that's really amazing.
And it was just like, and they said, well, if you say anything, and a few people raised their hand that this kind of defied everyone and said, okay, fine, I'm mentally ill, and but they said, well, if you raise your hand, then you're going to be here for another month or two. And this is people coming back from, a combat tour where I was in Mosul, Iraq, and Baghdad, and these people, were ready to go home. And unlike, World War II, where you had time coming back into the country, you would take a ocean liner coming back in. Now, instantaneously, and within 24 hours, you're back in country. And then they put you in that red sports car. We had a lot of people dying in red sports car injuries, right? Because they just came back with no mental health screening, no debriefing, no time to, reacclimate. So I'm just really glad that the two of you are out there fighting this fight. And, we're running out of time now, but I want you to tell us, where should people go to find out more about what you're doing, both yourself, Brent, and Coco?
Well, I think probably since I'm joining the Veteran Advocacy Project, we should, Coco, it'd be great if you could tell people who are listening or interested either in what we do or in helping out, how to connect with the Veteran Advocacy Project.
Yeah, so they can go to veteranadvocacy.org, and we're on Twitter, and we have a really strong, healthy pro bono program. So we have a lot of volunteer lawyers because we need so many more advocates doing this work.
Yeah.
So they can get more information there, and we have a couple of practice areas, but this one, like I said, really is the heart of our mission.
Well, all I can say is that Brent Filbert and Coco Culhane, both of you are our heroes. Thank you for what you do for the veterans. And the Veteran Clinic at the University of Missouri School of Law is at the forefront of justice and making sure that things work out for our veterans, and we have got to appreciate everything that you do. And in your honor, Coco, next week I'm going to wear my Brooklyn Born and Raised shirt. My sister sent me that for my birthday a month ago.
Excellent. So happy birthday.
It's time to wear it.
That's great.